Welcome to the Cozy Hearth podcast. This is the second episode, and this is a podcast featuring the Cozy Vales Scribes. I'm your host, Kit Muse, and I'm joined today by Scott Walker and Melissa Gunn. Fill a mug with your favorite cozy beverage and settle in for today's episode where we are going to be discussing the book that everybody's still talking about in the cozy fantasy space, Legends and Lattes. And we're going to talk about cozy fantasy and fiction in general. So welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for hosting, Kit.
Great. Well, let's begin with a brief introduction. This is our second episode, so we're still getting to know the scribes of the Cozy Vales project. Scott, why don't you go ahead and start and tell us a little bit about yourself, your writing, and what you have in the project.
So, real short, I guess we're talking because a couple of years ago I read Legends and Lattes and fell in love with cozy fantasy. And about probably 9 months later, I went into Selena Eckert's Facebook group and posted a very, probably at the time, a very uh, puzzling post that said, "Hey, I kind of want to do this cozy fantasy shared role thing, and I'm not exactly sure about the name or exactly how it's going to work, but here's my ideas, and if it sounds interesting, let me know." And I got a dozen out of that. I think I was at 10. We had 10 authors come in and sign contracts and join the formal project. And about 6 months, 8 months later, I think we launched our first anthology. It's been a while. It's been like 3 years. So it's been a journey. So yeah, like that's kind of my role and why I'm here. And I've loved working on this project and getting to meet so many amazing, talented authors. And as you can see around me, we've got anthologies that we've got from all of the scribes who've participated in the cozy fantasy shared world of Cozy Vales. And I've got my novel, my number one novel in my Appleton series. We've got another anthology coming out. Autumn Tales is going to drop in probably mid-September. And we've done first canonical reads. We've got all those done. So the scribes are now busily editing their stories and getting ready to launch that. We'll probably take care of the cover in the next maybe month or so. So yeah, we have another anthology all lined up for readers.
I was just looking at those covers. I can't wait. I just can't wait. It makes it so much more real to see a cover, I think.
It does. It really does. So I'm excited to see how the votes come in so we can just pick one and get going. I'm very excited about it.
Wonderful. Well, Melissa, why don't you tell our listeners and our viewers just a little bit about yourself? I know you kind of came into the project when I did, and maybe tease a bit for your autumn story.
Sure, thank you. I've been writing for a few years, but I started off writing more science fantasy, and then the world moved, and I started reading some things, including Legends and Lattes, which I thought it was just so much fun to have something which wasn't enormously high stakes, and so I also started writing cozier stories. With I've got a series called the Cozy Urban Fantasy, which is ongoing and it's sort of shorter reads, but which I hope fit into that cozy space with I guess, a focus on the smaller things. And whilst things go wrong, not everything goes wrong, and some things go right, and there's sort of the found family vibes, that sort of thing. So that's my previous writing, and then I happened upon Scott's second post in Selena Eckert's page, and thought, oh, that sounds like something that's right up my alley. So I've joined the Cozy Vales Scribes, and I've been writing my very first Cozy Vales short story, which will be part of the Autumn Tales anthology. And I have leaned into the tasty food vibes. Really enjoyed creating a veil all my own within the shared world. And so I've got a story that takes place in a celiac friendly veil. So, so with delicious, tasty pancakes and something called thornberry syrup, which is based on an imaginary berry with wonderful properties that you'd absolutely want to eat. And I actually wish I really could. So I've tried to focus on the family and family and food. Yeah, good cozy topics, but
Yeah.
also that inclusiveness and sort of welcoming ethos, I think that goes well with the cozy space. So that story is A Batch of Thornberry Syrup.
And
Well,
it's a
that
great
sounds,
story. It's a great story.
Thank you.
yeah, that sounds absolutely wonderful. And I love that you mentioned the low stakes because I read Legends and Lattes right after the spring semester ended. So I read it kind of as a palate cleanser after all the graduate level books. And then I immediately passed the book to my spouse and said, you have to read this. And he read it and he was like, I liked it, but that was kind of weird because the stakes were really low. I mean, and he, he's very big Tolkien epic fantasy fan. So I was like, yeah, but isn't that nice? So I think that's where I'll start there with the low stakes. Um, how did that change kind of your perception of fantasy, or how did that change how you thought about this genre?
Do you know, I think it is something that's been in the fantasy genre all along. Like you mentioned Tolkien, and some of the most enjoyable parts of, say, the Lord of the Rings is the bits where Sam and Merry and Pippin have a feast on mushrooms, and those the Shire, of course, coming from New Zealand. We have our own version of Hobbiton, which you can still visit. Totally shameless plug. Um, but it's also got that low stakes. It's focusing on the cozy parts of the epic fantasy. So I think it's leaning into something which was there all along, but expanding the low stakes parts because people need something cozy from time to time.
I thought that too because uh, I grew up reading like Mercedes Lackey's Valdemar books. And even though there are some larger stakes there, I mean, they're fighting for the kingdom of Valdemar, it's very cozy in that there's one character and his series, they all focus around hand pies and different types of hand pies. And that like that food is a constant comfort in that series. And so, yeah, I totally agree. I think that it's been in the fantasy genre all along. How about you, Scott?
I have been asked how I define cozy fantasy, and I think like most genres, it comes down to a collection of common tropes and context. So one of the early reads, actually, this applies to Legends and Lattes, which I just skimmed before this podcast because it's been 3 years since I read it. I was like, I should like brush up on it before we talk about it. And what's interesting for me was several of the books in 2022 and 2023, when I was really exploring this space, used the F word or had, murders happening in the first chapter of not adults or bad people, of like innocent adolescents. And I was like, who, what, how is this cozy fantasy? I mean, I'm clutching my pearls in the whole 9 yards. And I'm realizing that in retrospect, a lot of it is violence off the page. It's not graphic. It's not on the page. And the profanity, it's not in every cozy fantasy book, but it's there a bit. But again, it is the context and the way that those words are used and how the author addresses those topics. So yeah, we have a lot of food, we have a lot of drink, and we definitely have low stakes. And those are very, very common tropes or elements in the stories. But a lot of it took me a while to realize this. I think a lot of it is context. It's how you deal with the violence, how you deal with those more mature topics and subjects. Um, there's one story, and it involves and someone's like, well, it's cozy adjacent. I think it's cozy fantasy, and I mean it deals with abuse, but the abuse happens off page, and so it was an eye-opening experience for me to go, oh, there's a lot that can fit under the cozy fantasy umbrella. And that's true of cozy fantasy. You know, Melissa, you talked about cozy urban fantasy. I've got a series of cozy urban fantasy books that I wrote as I was making my slow progression from urban fantasy to cozy fantasy. And I think all those mashups, whether it's cozy romance, cozy mystery, cozy contempt, whatever, those elements remain the same, as well as the context. It's how it gets dealt with by the author. So lots of different stories, lots of different tones and voices, but there's definitely some similarities across what most readers consider cozy fantasy.
I agree, very much so. I also liked the idea, and Legends and Lattes explored this very well right from the start. Kind of what happens next? What happens after the big battle? What happens after you get the treasure? And it's been a long time since I played D&D, but when we gamed, it was often you go on a quest, you hopefully succeed at your quest, and then another quest, and you just keep going. And to me, cozy fantasy felt very much like the breathing room
Yeah.
between
That makes sense.
between the quests. Yeah. Well, let's talk about the book more specifically. What did you all enjoy about, what was kind of your favorite parts of the book? What really spoke to you? Let's just riff on that for a while.
Melissa, why don't you go first?
I think that one of the things I appreciated was that it took a classic villain character. So the what happens next was really explicitly that this was an orc who'd been in wars and killed lots of people and then was going off to set up a new life. So that was, I guess, I like the fact that it explored the possibility that even villains have a good side, and it went no, really this was the main character, so obviously clearly not a villain unless you look at it in what they'd done in the past. So I guess it gives that sort of second chances potential. I think that's one of the things that I appreciate about it. I also liked the way that nothing was immediately fine, and like things didn't go right all the time. Because I mean, where would the story be with if everything went right? So, so cozy doesn't mean that it has to go right all the time. And I thought that it did that well, including in the sort of interpersonal relationships, the attempt to get the shop going. There were always setbacks, low stakes setbacks, but setbacks. So it still had narrative flow.
Yeah, I think one of the things, and I even used this term myself just a few minutes ago, but I think the term low stakes gets tossed around a lot, and I think that's really a misnomer because I think what a lot of readers really are drawn to for cozy fantasy is the tropes and like I need a light read. I don't want a dystopian, dark, cynical take on a fictional world. They want something that's going to make them feel happy at the end, even though, to Melissa, to your point, there's friction points along the way. Um, but I think that low stakes does a little bit of a disservice because, especially in this book, the stakes are incredibly high for the characters. And, as readers, we choose to identify with those characters. We usually pick one as our avatar. We kind of go through the story in the eyes and walking in the steps of that avatar, of that character. And there's some incredibly high stakes at the personal level. So we're not saving the world. The stakes are not high insofar as we have to save the world, but they're incredibly high nonetheless at the personal level. And so it's a perhaps a smaller story, excuse me, a smaller story or a smaller stage, but it's still very high stakes. And I think that's one of the things that I picked up on this book. Interestingly enough, I remember finishing it going, nothing happened. Like literally, like this book could not be slower. It was literally a startup. It was a documentary about a startup, right? And every chapter was like one more slow advancement towards them successfully running the shop. When I reread it, I was like, oh no, there's actually quite a bit that goes on. There's a lot of action that goes on. There are, I mean, I think we're doing, are we doing spoilers, Kit? How are we handling that?
Um, this podcast may contain spoilers.
I'll try to go spoiler light. I mean, there were certainly situations that the narrator and the characters made the reader feel like there is true life and death
hmm
stakes in play. Um, but at the end, the dog survives. Everybody's fine. It has a happy ending. That's not a spoiler. It has a happy ending, and for me, it was just like, but it still, I was like, at the time, I'm like, I don't, I don't know why I like this book. It was very frustrating. I don't know why I like this book. Nothing happened. What's going on? Why am I in love with this book? Why do I want to read more right now? I don't understand this. It doesn't follow the typical path, pacing, the arcs of the books that I was reading at the time, or even the books that I was writing at the time. And so it was a fascinating puzzle that took me a while to sort through. And I just had to keep reading more cozy books. And then being in Selena's Facebook group and learning some of the other titles that people were enjoying and why they were gravitating to this genre, what this genre meant to readers. Then I was like, oh, now I get it. Now I get it. So this was definitely my gateway. It was my first, I would say, overtly cozy fantasy read, but I do tend to think of The Hobbit as my first true cozy fantasy. Because if you look at the stakes here and you look at the stakes in The Hobbit, they're rather similar. We're not saving the world from Sauron in The Hobbit, and the stakes are somewhat personal. There's a personal motivation for the dwarves, and there's a lot of food and drink and singing and humor, and but there's also some action. So to me, that technically I call that's my first cozy fantasy read, but I still look at Legends of Latte as my cozy fantasy gateway because it just hit me at a point in my life where it was like, oh, I don't know what this is, but I know I want more of it and I want to write it. At some point, I want to write this.
So
That,
for me, I think that,
oh, please
um,
go ahead.
thanks. So I think that one of the things you mentioned there is that, it's about people and just doing their thing. And one of the things that I think really works well in Legends and Lattes is the fact that it's got a lot of relatable points. So it is a startup. It's got hot drinks. So they're small things, but they're things that people can really see themselves in. And I think that's part of why, for me at least, it hooked you in because you could see yourself in some of those character roles, in some of those situations. They're in some ways more accessible than, oh, let's go slay the dragon. Very
And I,
few of us go slay dragons.
yeah, very few of us. And I think too, instead of low stakes, I felt the stakes were internal.
Mhm.
That makes
That
sense.
that she was chasing her dream, that she wanted to share something that she enjoyed with the world. And to Melissa's point, I think that's something that, you know, no matter where we live or what we're doing, I think it's very relatable, city or, city, rural, countries, wherever, it's very relatable to want to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. If somebody has finished Legends and Lattes, what suggestions for reading material would you give them next?
Mm. So
Well, I mean,
you go first.
Well,
well,
yeah, besides our anthologies.
yeah, I mean,
Obviously
no,
the
I
anthologies.
was thinking like I was thinking back, House in the Cerulean Sea was the second book that I read, and I read it within a week of finishing Legends and Lattes. And I wish I knew exactly how those books came across my radar because I hadn't found Selena's Facebook group. Reading these two books led me down that rabbit hole that led me to her group when I was searching Facebook to see if there were in fact any cozy fantasy focused groups on there. And so I wish I could tell you exactly how those books came across my radar. I don't have any clue, but I do know that I read them back to back. And House on the Cerulean Sea, I would say it's cozy urban fantasy. And that one-two punch, like two different genres, but very similar tropes, very similar themes, similar vibes and feelings, happy ending, the whole nine yards. That left a mark on me. So for somebody who's looking for more, there are a ton of cozy fantasy options out there, but a reminder that there are, non-fantasy cozy reads out there in other genres like romance, sci-fi. Becky Chambers has written a couple of sci-fi books that regularly crop up on cozy read recommendations, and then cozy urban fantasy. So I think there are lots of options out there, but I'm very curious to see what you and Melissa say.
So I read a lot of urban fantasy still, and cozy urban fantasy is absolutely in there. I know that one that's a lot of people recommend for as an indie author of cozy fantasy is Liz Delton, who does a lot of novellas, and I think she's coming from the steampunk angle, but has a new cozy coming out. I guess another one that I've enjoyed, also cozy urban fantasy, is A.L. Tippett's. She's got a couple of them out now, and they're focused on a single mother in a magical version of our world, so urban fantasy. Uh, and so they're also Australian, so they have a lot of people, particularly the main character, the mother, avoiding swearing around her child. So the first one, I think, is Mother Trucking Monsters.
Love it.
Yeah,
Love
so
it.
she has a lot of fun with the humor in that. The other one I wanted to mention probably goes backwards. Yep, was Diana Wynne Jones. So she's mostly known as a writer for um, younger YA, but I've been rereading some of those, and particularly things like the Dark Lord of Dirkholm, which takes heaps of the classic fantasy tropes and makes them into a fantasy where a world is being treated as a theme park, and so somebody gets allocated as the Dark Lord. And they're just a normally normal family man doing their thing, and suddenly they have to turn around and be the Dark Lord. And it does cover some dark things, but and they're like off stage. So like any nasty things that happen are not on the page, and it does have a happy ending. So I think it fits. It fits the theme. It's got humor. It's got some. I remember the cheese particularly. So it's got some food and drink, and and it's got a happy ending. And doesn't. Although there is some world saving involved, it's most of it's actually down on the nitty gritty level of interpersonal relationships. Uh, it's worth a go.
Awesome. I actually don't have many recommendations because maybe this is where I admit it. I had not read cozy fantasy per se when I joined Cozy Vales. I just knew it was a world I wanted to be in, from what I had seen. And so Legends and Lattes was my first cozy fantasy book just, a few weeks ago. But I do appreciate Scott's point about other genres. If the horses behind me don't give it away, I'm a big horse person. And so like there are certain tropes and certain comfort tropes when you write horse stories and whether they're fantasy, whether they're contemporary, and they're tropes that horse people recognize. And so for me, that's why Valdemar to me feels very cozy adjacent. Depending on the series, there sometimes is some bad stuff that happens. The first series, Arrows of the Queen, in the second and third book, there's some bad stuff that happens, but it tends to happen closer to the edge of the page. But it's still very much, um, you know, very much with the same vibes as far as found family and, bringing people together and overcoming odds and all that good stuff.
You've reminded me that, yeah, I agree. Those tropes really do help the coziness. You've reminded me of another urban fantasy, but cozy, which was KM Shay's. Um, Now I've forgotten the name of it. She's got a whole series of trilogies, which are all very much in the cozy urban fantasy genre. So cozy adjacent, possibly, but yeah, those are also worth a go for similar vibes.
Definitely. Well, great. And of course, just a quick reminder, we will put all the book titles, links, all that good stuff in the show notes so you can fill up your reading device and your bookshelves with more cozy reads. So we've talked a bit about the tropes and we've talked a bit about the feel of cozy vibes. Let's talk a bit about the characters because I feel like Cozy Fantasy and Legends and Lattes very much has everyday type characters. I mean, even, the secondary characters that come in, they're very relatable. There's a relatability to them, and they also are very recognizable. What do you guys think?
Oh, hands down, Thimble's my favorite character. Like, who doesn't love a Racken slinging croissants in a kitchen, right? Like, that's just like, and the fact that he doesn't say much, I love Thimble. And I'm
Hmm.
like, I want that name. I wanted that name for a character. I'm like, no, I can't have it. I can't do it.
Yeah, I agree. That's the best character. But yes, there are characters that you might just happen across in daily life. Apart from the fact that, there's orcs and demons and raccoons and making croissants.
They're really good croissants.
Well, obviously, there's a lot of talent there. Untapped.
Definitely. Makes you wonder where they trained.
That could be another cozy story.
That could be. Well, I feel like our conversation is kind of coming to a natural close. Let's take a moment just to let our listeners and viewers know, and I'll start with you, Melissa. Where can somebody find out more about your books and more information about where you hang out online?
Sure. The best place to find me is on my website, melissagunn.com. And I'm sure we'll have a link for those in the show notes. And otherwise, Instagram, also under Melissa Gunn Author. So pretty easy to find.
Great.
So my urban fantasy stories are all at Scott is Writing, which is my author handle across social media sites. But I write under the name L.A. Scott for Cozy Vales. So you'll find my Cozy Vales short stories and novel under L.A. Scott. And so if you go to scottiswriting.com/L.A. Scott, you should be able to find all of my Cozy Vales books there. Alternatively, this will make it easy. Just go to cozyvales.com and click on the little link that says Scribes.
Great reminder. Great reminder. And because I haven't given out my links yet, you can find me at kitauthor.com. And I hang out mostly on Blue Sky these days where I am kitauthor.com on Blue Sky and pretty much Kit Author everywhere else. So, well, great. This has been a lovely conversation. I am so glad we were able to get together and talk about what is clearly one of all of our favorite books. So thank you so much for being here. Thank everybody for listening to this episode of the Cozy Hearth and keep it cozy.